So now I want to introduce our sponsors at Greenfly. We are so proud to have them as a sponsor today, a partner in this event. And we're really excited for this conversation. So Andrew, I'd love to invite you on stage. Andrew Patterson, the SVP of Partnerships and Strategy at Greenfly. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Perfect. So I guess at Greenfly, we have the pleasure of working with so many amazing creative teams, and pretty much across the board, we've seen two things really change this past year. The first is that creative has become so much harder to produce. People are remote, staff has been streamlined, and photo shoots have been logistically difficult and even more expensive. The second thing that we've seen is that the increased importance and necessity of digital content as more people are gravitating towards raw, unpolished, unprofessional content that's also authentic and original. I'm happy to have discussed some of this today, our panelists. We have Karen Ramming, the Director of Social Media at the Golden State Warriors, Patrick Hooper, the Director of Integrated Marketing at the San Jose Sharks, and EJ Aguado, the Manager of Player Marketing at Major League Baseball. Thank you all for joining. So to kick things off, my first question is, do you have any examples of trends or changes that you've seen over the past year? And I guess we'll kick it off with you, EJ.
Thanks, Andrew. Really happy to be here. I think we saw a lot of trends that were a long time coming really accelerate over the past year. I think entertainment in many ways became almost exclusively virtual, and we saw a lot of awesome innovation as a result of that. I don't think it's a coincidence that platforms like Clubhouse and Versus really took off last year. And I think those are trends we're going to continue to see. In terms of athletes specifically, especially baseball players, last year in March 2020, our guys were getting ready to start the season and everything shut down, and they had a bunch of downtime and they were looking for ways to engage. So one thing we did was we formatted different ways that we could have them host different types of content on our social channels. So we used IG Lives and other different formats for fan engagement that allowed them to take over. And we ended up having over 50 players take us up on that over the course of the past year. I think the emphasis on athlete-driven content and direct athlete to fan engagement is something that was already coming, but definitely a trend that got stronger last year, and we expect to see more of that.
All right, perfect. Karen, curious as to your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry for jumping off there real quick. We had some audio technical difficulties, as is the case with all work from home. Yes, 100% on that note as well. It's something that we noticed that's been different in this digital world that we work in lately has been executing a lot of our corporate partnerships and as well as just making good for a lot of our media partners as well. Not having fans in the building, obviously that's going to affect a lot of the corporate partners that we work with and a lot of their contracts, because so many of their elements are executed in arena with a building full of fans. So at the start of COVID, that was something that was a really high priority for us, was figuring out a way that we can still execute these partner contracts in a way that makes sense for our digital channels to make sure that it works for both our brand and theirs and both of our brand objectives. So one way that we did this at GSW was we actually pivoted our entire social strategy for our Chase Center handles, our arena handles. And we decided that, well, if we have handles for the building, but we can't have fans in the building, then we'll try to replicate that game day experience on Chase Center channels as much as possible. That was great for engagement with the channels in general, but it also worked really, really well for our corporate partnerships and those contracts, because the audiences are so similar with that really hyper-local Bay Area audience on Chase Center channels and the Bay Area audience that you would normally get in the building. So we're doing things like executing the in-arena elements such as Chase Play of the Game on social media, Wingstop Warriors Win, some Beats assets. There's just so many that we worked really closely with our CP team on to make sure that we can still make good on those contracts. Also, I mentioned briefly media members. That's another change that happened pretty significantly within our organization. We have an excellent PR department, and they have so many great relationships with all of the media outlets around the country and around the world. And if you had gone to a Warriors game pre-COVID, you would notice that every single spot on the baseline was taken by media outlets. All of the media seats were full. People wanted to cover our team. Now with COVID, they still want to cover our team. They still need that content, but they aren't actually cleared to be in the arena and get it themselves. So what we're doing on our end is we're actually capturing that content. The folks on our creative team who are within the testing and tiering system that the NBA laid out. And we're sending that to those media outlets to make sure that they are still getting the content that they need and that we're still being good media and team partners to them.
Fantastic, thank you. And Patrick from the hockey world?
Yeah, absolutely. And it wouldn't be a true digital social media panel without some troubleshooting technical difficulties to start. So we'll see how that goes. We're all well adept at that. Yeah, it echoes what Karen said. The pandemic hit, and it was quickly figured out that digital was going to be, in some ways, a life-saving mechanism for sponsorship and sponsorship assets. So the terms make good and pivot, are part of our daily vernacular now. And really, it emphasized how can we do this with not just remote engagement, but also remote production. So, one early example of that we hit was the 2020 Nhl Draft, which traditionally in hockey, it's a point where all teams, all 31 plus clubs and hockey operations and, hundreds of draft prospects all gather to one arena, and all of your content production team is there as well, from video to photo to social, and you're able to just aggregate content, collect, connect with these prospects that you're drafting and produce a lot of real-time content. This was our first venture into doing this all remote, and had to kind of pivot a lot of our activations and do so in a way that was meaningful to the business. And we had, one of our largest sponsors come on and sponsor the content. So we established a plan on how we can collect and create content from a remote standpoint, using technology to connect with these draft prospects who were being selected at weird hours of their day all over the globe, and quickly onboard them to a piece of technology so that they could send us back content and we could request, we could send them content. We had a plan established so that they were celebrating, the biggest moment in their lives of being drafted by an NHL team, and then also trying to find out who they were. And we struck gold a little bit with that process that was developed, where one of the kids that we drafted, Tristan Robbins, his dad actually played for the Sharks for a little bit back in the 90s, and a coincidental moment. But if not for this process and this kind of remote flow that was set up beforehand, and sort of anticipated, we wouldn't have been able to quickly figure that out and then try to get some piece of unique content. And we actually had the ability to get from him quickly a photo of him wearing his dad's original starter jacket from when he was on the team in the 90s, one of those classic Sharks 90s jackets that everyone loved. And he's wearing it right next to his dad, and arguably the biggest moment of their life, his life certainly. And then we could share that with our fans and introduce this story. Certainly a unique moment that we had to capitalize on due to this remote kind of media day type experience. We also set up opportunities for our disconnected fan base, like our Sharks 365, our season ticket holders, who had the games and the venues ripped out from under them in March, and we wanted to find a way to have them feel more connected. So we actually incorporated them into the content plan for this draft coverage, and had it set up so that they were onboarded and producing content for us, just like any athlete or any other media member, and they were welcoming these draft prospects as we selected them, and had kind of a fun little workflow set up that also rewarded them and made them feel like they were a part of the content planning. So, a big success in our eyes, and trying to bring people together in a really weird time. It was the height of the pandemic, summer, no one knows what's going on. And, how do we connect everybody through remote engagement, remote production, and serve the business through sponsorship?
That's awesome. I mean, as you're kind of talking about the situation of kind of making lemonade out of lemons, I'm curious how these trends have kind of impacted how you've collected content and creatively executed on some of these ideas. You started going into a little bit about the draft. I'm wondering if you can expand on that and talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll even fast forward to a similar experience. The pandemic carried on, right? We all thought it was going to eventually end, and it kept going. Soon enough, the NBA and the NHL found out we'd have a season ahead, and so we quickly had to scramble for what we're going to do. Maybe a little bit unique to the Sharks in our situation. Our county actually prohibited any contact sports in the county at the time our training camp was supposed to begin, and that was a bit of an added curveball that 2021 was deciding to throw at us. So we were forced out of our homes and had to set up a remote training camp in Arizona. to get these athletes ready for a season when they had been off for a considerable amount of time under some very strict, quarantine guidelines. Normally training camp is such a monumental effort for us. It's where we probably collect, arguably 60 to 80% of our content for the year, especially on the video side. So to have that now be a remote camp where we have, a skeleton crew who even those that could go, I think we were limited to just one social media person, one video person, which is great to have them, but they're even governed by further restrictions on how much they can have access with players, how far they have to stay back, the mask wearing and all that. It just really forced us to think quite creatively. So we just tried to carry that mentality through on how do we produce remote content even when we're physically there, take advantage of players' times. I think our storytelling efforts have accelerated this direction with the pandemic, but really focusing on player personality, away from the ice, away from the rink. What is that supplemental story that we can give fans access to? So again, the peculiarness of being set up for a remote training camp outside of your own state, we wanted the players to tell that authentic story, to produce a video content vlog series from inside of their hotel rooms, telling what life is like in the pandemic, what they're reading, what they're bored out of their minds in some ways with it's just practice and then back to the room and you got to stay there, right? So what is that like? How is it like getting back up and going? And internally it caused a lot of panic, right? We have some very talented creative content producers. Our photographer was certainly panicking over how do I get these headshots done and how is this going to work? So it's comical if you look back at some of the Zoom calls where you're seeing kind of these remote cameras set up and you're talking, hey, can you move it a little bit this way? It feels like you've got kind of remote controls trying to build this whole thing. So we had a successful training camp. Again, it was a sponsored initiative trying to pivot ways that we can take advantage of this digital engagement and take, where a lot of in-venue revenue was spent and move it to a digital landscape and maybe even give it some different and more engaging eyeballs because of that. So you may see some of this stuff continue on even back when things are, I'll use the quotes normal, whatever that means.
Karen, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing for us is not a new learning by any means, but COVID really just reinforced it. We take a lot of efforts, or we've been taking a lot more efforts lately in using this opportunity to humanize our players a bit more and, make our fans aware of them as people, what they like, what they don't like, habits, whatever is going on, but what they're doing off the court. I think so many people, you can get like Steph Curry highlights from like ESPN or NBA, like any other outlet, but we have a really unique position in the way that our creative team is embedded with the basketball team this season to showcase our players on a much more human level and get more of that emotional connection between our fans to these guys. And anytime that you build that emotional connection between fans and players directly, the fans are just going to become that much more loyal and they're going to care about your team and your brand that much more. So that's something that we've had the unique opportunity this season. We have two members of our creative team, Michelle on the social team and Tom on our video team, who are embedded with the team for every single game, every single practice, every single road trip. And so they've gotten to know these guys and know the stories that we can tell beyond what they're doing on the court to try to humanize them that much more and bring a different angle of our coverage of our team to our fans.
Awesome, thank you. I guess kind of following on that, EJ, I know you run the MLB Players Program, which is kind of a league initiative on that idea of humanizing players or bringing out more of their personality there. Can you talk a little bit about what you do and how that has grown from the pandemic with what you started and where you were able to build on top of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Player Social Program was launched in early 2019 for the goal of giving players more content on a daily basis to post on their social channels and ultimately develop their own brands. And that the reasoning behind that is to allow them to engage with fans and to to humanize them to their fans and give them the content on a daily basis that they post on social without having to ask for it, without having to like text somebody or take an extra step. So basically, we launched the program because we want these guys to engage with their fans, and Gen Z has a stronger affinity with players than any generation before them. So by us giving them this content and us allowing them to, on a daily basis, like I said, have this stuff at their fingertips, we want them to build their social followings, engage with fans, and empower them to have that consistent ability to be to develop their individual brands and ultimately help grow the sport of baseball. Perfect.
So I guess these days, not so much elbow to elbow, but probably mask to mask. Karen, I know you're with your players all the time. When you think about kind of giving them content, I'm wondering from your perspective, like, does it work? How do you communicate the value to those players, and how do you know if they actually find it valuable after they get it?
Yeah, I mean, short answer is yes, it works. I think in the NBA, we're pretty lucky that a lot of the players and a lot of the teams just get the importance of social media and they get digital. And especially with our specific roster, we have a lot of younger guys on our team this year and they grew up with the internet. So they understand the importance of having a social media presence, their own individual brand, and what that means for them as a professional athlete and just continuing on their legacy or securing partnership deals, whatever their motivation may be behind their digital presence, but they get it. And so for us, that's great for us because we can ship them all the content in the world and they still want more. So that's where something like Greenfly and PhotoShelter come in really handy because we get hundreds, if not thousands of photos every game. We'll talk about this a little bit more later, but PhotoShelter has the roster IQ, the AI tagging, that's naturally integrated with Greenfly. So we just pull in all those photos and then the players have them immediately after the game, immediately after practice. Even airport departure photos or arrival photos, anything like that that they want, it'll be right there for them so that way they can do with it what they please. I think that they tell us what they want, which is also really nice. Michelle, I mentioned, who's on the road with them, they'll just tell her like, oh, I want to make sure I want like a dope photo of my shirt. And so she knows what to focus on. They also tell us if we send them content and they're like, I don't want that kind of thing, or like, I don't like how I look in those photos. We take note of that so that way we aren't like spamming them, obviously, and we can kind of get a little bit more refined in all the content that we send them. So that way it's a bit big of a bang for our buck.
Perfect. To dive a little into that more, when you talk about content that they like, I mean, other than game content, what are you really sharing with them? What are you sending with them? And what do you find is resonating with those players?
Yeah, a lot of it is around arrival photos and around airport departure photos. I think that's a great time for them to showcase like their own personal style or things that they believe in. So they'll wear brands that they like or any kind of brands that they're partnered with, or they'll wear some shirts that represent like a cause that they're believing in. It's just an easy platform for them to get on and showcase what they want through images through their fashion.
Perfect. And Patrick, I guess in hockey, do you see the same thing? I know the average age of your players is slightly a little older than the NBA, so I'm curious how you've seen it in your time at the Sharks of players kind of being receptive to that content and what's working.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of look across at the leagues and compare how those kind of cohorts are different. Hockey's certainly unique, I'd assume, from MLB as much as NBA, the age difference, but also the culture seems to be a bit different too. I think for a long time, kind of this old school mentality has run the locker room for a lot of hockey teams, and it's maybe taken an injection of some youth who've grown up with social media and on digital platforms to maybe start to turn that tide a bit. So maybe in some ways it's more about in the NHL and certainly club to club, it's about trying to prove and show to these guys that if you want to be on these social platforms, here's a way to do it safely, confidently. We can be, as the digital marketing teams, a service to you. And technology is a massive part of that equation, right? How do we make it easy? And that's probably universal across all athletes in all leagues and sports. How do you make it easy on them? Time is a big issue that they're battling, right? So how do they trust the technology to make it easy on their efforts? One area that's really we've had success with is the mutually beneficial, bi-directional flow of content, right? We're trading them, we're giving them as much content as maybe we're asking from them, and they're seeing kind of the value in that relationship. Very comparable to what Karen was saying in terms of everyone wants the arrival photos, especially when they're dressed up in the suits. We've got, Evander Kane, Timo Meyer, they're the guys who are texting our photographer, hey, I'll be there in 15 minutes. I'm wearing a new watch. Can you make sure you catch this? Right. And kind of what their their angle is, but we want to make that effort because we want to show to them like, hey, we're here for this. Like this is a service we can provide you. We want to make you look good and show off kind of your game off the ice. We have another player in Curtis Gabriel who's just got such a strong social identity. That he we joke internally sometimes that it's almost like he's another member of our social media content team, because he'll message us right after practice and be like, hey, I noticed you guys posted this photo of me on Instagram. Can I get like an alternate photo so I can push this out on my channels? And it feels like you're just talking internally with someone again. So we definitely want to encourage that and work, players who are invested strongly in that. We want to, give them a foundation to stand on. But then also, especially in hockey, it's about those who maybe have the platform but don't really know what to post. We go through this year was a bit of a challenge, but normally we go through during training camp and have them fill out kind of that questionnaire of, are you on social? Do you want us to help you with your content? What type of content do you need? Who are your buddies on the team? What type of photos do you want? Those types of things that help us almost create like this, CRM with these players on how we want to actually, help them and support them, because it is mutually beneficial. We want them telling stories about themselves and the team.
Perfect. And I guess, EJ, you have more than a few players in your program. I mean, how do you think about juggling that, just given the sheer volume? And also the fact that, Karen and Patrick talked a lot about the personal conversations they're having, the relationships they're developing. I'm curious from a league level how you've kind of tackled that. What are your entry points in your approach?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We have over 965 players in the program right now, so definitely a lot of guys. And in terms of how we reach them, it's through a variety of ways. It's through agents, it's through clubs, it's through Jewel events where we onboard them to get their content. And, we can say it definitively works. In the first year of the program, we clearly saw volume, engagement rates, and account growth go up. And the reason we believe it works is because these guys play 162 games in 175 days. So if you're going to add any habit to their daily routine, that needs to be an efficient habit. And we believe the player social program through Greenfly is as efficient as it gets. Like I was alluding to earlier, these guys pick up their phone after the last out and the content is right there at their fingertips. They don't have to track it down from anywhere. They don't have to reach out to anybody, and they have it ready to go. Before the player social program started, there was a variety of different workflows to varying degrees of efficiency. One story I heard once was that a player would get a Google Drive link. He would text it to his agent because he didn't know how to use it. His agent would download the photos and then text it back to him. And then after this whole sequence was done, 2 days later, the player would have the photos in his phone. In the time it took me to say that, a player could receive a piece of content from one of our LCCs or a team photographer on the ground through the workflow we have now. So I would say it's a definite improvement, and we've seen guys definitely adopt it as a result of that. A growing number of team photographers use this workflow, and all our LCCs do too. And last year we saw 42,000 downloads, over 3,000 shares directly from Greenfly. So I think what we're doing is working at scale, which is important to us because we want to help all our players as much as we can. We've heard prominent players say it's never been easier to be active on social because of Greenfly and because of the Mlb Players social program. So we know it's working and we want to continue to build on it.
Awesome. So, I mean, I know you started talking about it a little bit. What kinds of content are you sending them? Is it game content? Karen and Patrick started talking about some of the different things. I'm curious from a league level, when you're working with 965 players, where is that content coming from? What are you sending them? How is that expanded, and where are you looking to go with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of stuff. So it's our photos and videos being captured by our live content team on the ground. They do a phenomenal job of getting that stuff and uploading it in real time. It's content being uploaded by our Mlb photo team, by team photographers going through the PhotoShelter workflow into Greenfly as well, routing directly to player galleries. It's custom content we work with our amazing design team on, like player graphics and different things like that. And video edits that we create too. We create hype videos for players to post. So I think it's an extremely wide variety of content that all goes through this workflow. And to your point, with 965 players, it's not one size fits all. So we know some guys like to post certain types of things more. We'll work to make sure that everybody who's creating that content knows their preferences and that they're more likely to post it.
Awesome. So I guess as you guys have all been talking about, even in giving content to players, it seems that there are a lot of other people who use content, whether internally or externally, the content that your team oversees. I'm curious about how do you manage it, organize it all? Any tips and tricks? It seems like it's a lot. I guess we can start with you, Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a lot, which is a good thing, right? I mean, we at the Sharks are lucky to have some talented creative video photography talent. That's a good thing. Invest in your creative. That's a great starting point. And then once you have that robust library and diversified library, we pursue ways to try to make sure that we're exposing it and engaging fans and engaging different groups in the right way. If it wasn't obvious, we use kind of a stack of PhotoShelter as our asset management tool and Greenfly as a content collaboration tool, and pair them together in a lot of ways. That technology is essential in that flow and that process. And we're still on a journey there. I think, the athletes is certainly a big component of that, but we see other opportunities within the business. I think corporate partnership is a big one. A good chunk of our partners, are engaged with us and maybe looking at the Sharks as an opportunity to expand their social and grow their social presence, and they're using our content where we have the content. They're using that relationship to help kind of build that brand. So we've tried some creative ways, I think, to make sure that we're exposing that desired content direct to those partners so that they can produce content in and around these moments. Maybe there's simple things like using the technology and the asset management tools to pick up on logos. In hockey, we have the dasher boards that all have the branded logos around the ice. So if we have a key moment in the game where players are hands up celebrating after a goal, and we've got a nice, beautiful shot that shows off the Kaiser Permanente or SAP logo in the background, making sure that we're extending those assets over to the social media managers for those accounts so that they can join in on that moment. We've got a lot of partners who are working with us on triggered campaigns, and the whole point is around how do I maximize on that moment. So those are some of the areas that we're kind of on that journey on right now. And even looking at how to further bucket our content, I think, beyond just here's who it is and here's, the date of relevance and that very traditional kind of Getty tagging is start to bucket it more in content themes and initiatives that are core to our business. Like, what are these initiatives that we're driving forward, whether it be diversity and inclusion or things around personality and stuff that helps our library, become a little bit more evergreen in terms of that content and storytelling initiative.
Awesome. EJ, I'll jump back to you.
Yeah, so in addition to serving content to over 900 players, and now we have 72 of the top 100 prospects in the player social program too. So the next generation of players is coming right behind them. Our live content team creates content and funnels it to players, clubs, and league accounts. So the infrastructure is all through Greenfly and distributed through there. Our MLB photo team also uploads content through PhotoShelter into our player workflow. So there's a lot of people who will have access to this tremendous amount of content and this high quality content. And I think, like I said, all the credit really goes to our live content team for setting this infrastructure up through Greenfly and using a variety of channels, integrations, and just over communicating a ton is pretty much how we're able to scale.
Perfect. And Karen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the AI tagging and roster IQ earlier and how much time it saves my team in terms of getting the players their content. And it honestly does save us hours of work every week just because of the sheer volume of content that we get, and not having to manually sort it is incredible. But we also use it for, a lot of our internal content distribution. My team will get hit up by various departments or external media outlets asking for specific photos of a player from a certain game. And with the AI tagging and being able to sort and filter it by game on top of that, it makes it so easy, especially when, we're getting, I mentioned hundreds, if not thousands of photos from each game from the team photographer. Not all of those make it to Getty. So making sure that we have the AI tagging on and that we can filter that way to get anyone whatever photo of whichever player they need. It's so nice. It's such a lifesaver.
Perfect. And so for our final question, I will switch sports slightly from what we've been talking about. And I'll steal one of my quotes from the esteemed Mike Tyson, which is, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, which I think is an accurate way to describe what 2020 was. But speaking of plans, now when you think about 2021, What are the challenges you see and what are the opportunities you're hoping to take advantage of? This is her last question. I'll let you guys take it as you want.
I can start with this one. I think the biggest thing that I noticed over the past year and that I hope continues to be the case going forward is how many more eyeballs and how much more importance has been placed on digital and placed on social specifically. I think anybody who works in the industry always knew that social media is incredibly important for a brand and its presence. It's where a lot of people interact with it. Oftentimes you have more followers than you do fans in the arena, all of those kinds of things. And I think that COVID really forced a lot of organizations to take a hard look at their digital creative social teams, take a look at how they're resourced, what their overall business objectives and how they're actually lending themselves to meet larger business goals are met, and also just the communication aspect and how that can be leveraged on behalf of the brand. And so I noticed it. I know I have a lot of anecdotes from other teams who noticed it as well. I think you will see a lot of jobs are hiring right now in sports digital because a lot of organizations noticed it as well. So was a challenge that I'm hoping turns into a continued opportunity in the future.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, I can jump in. I love that. I think the value of digital content, of social media has never been higher. And I think it was already trending in that direction, but the last year has really accelerated those trends. And to that end, I'm looking forward to taking the good stuff from 2020, the technology, the innovation, and the athlete content trends and the athlete direct athlete to fan interaction on digital trends, and keeping those, the good stuff, hopefully not getting punched in the face by Tyson again, but taking the good stuff and then reintroducing the things we love, like fans at the ballparks and arenas, and being able to share content or shoot content with players on the field and off the field and be in person. I think with all that stuff coming back and the good trends of 2020 continuing, I think there's going to be some really special ideas and innovation coming over the next few years, and I'm looking forward to that.
Perfect. Patrick?
Yeah, and if you look closely at a hockey game and watch long enough, you may actually see a boxing match just open up right in the middle of the game, and it's a legal ability for someone to get punched in the face. So we do have that merger of sports. I echo what EJ and Karen said, absolutely. And I think it was I'll use the heavy quotes again, return to whatever normal is. I think everyone sees that that's going to be an evolved normal. Something's going to carry through. Some of these key wins are going to carry through, whether it's internally with more, openness to remote offices and how we all produce content as teams across, our production capabilities, and also with our customers and fans. They're certainly going to have some hesitancy. What is that like when I come back and start to do some things I used to do with that brand? And I think we just accelerate towards a lot of what we've been doing in terms of content and trying to engage a fan base and a customer base on a 365 holistic basis, like digital, global, maybe even evolving from what those traditional means were. I mean, I think if you look at how this pandemic has tested a lot of businesses, you can even get a lot of great inspiration from how the restaurant industry has just had to survive with some super creative ways that they're operating. I mean, the movie industry, right? I'm addicted to movie theater popcorn. It's a legit problem. And just down the street, they've opened up to just doing happy hour, come and get your popcorn and go, and I just take that home, right? So it's how do we as a sports and entertainment business kind of evolve some of our traditional methods to take some of this good that digital can do and pivot and keep rolling with it, because we know it's going to be a powerful asset for our businesses and our content teams going forward.
All right, perfect. I thank you guys all so much for joining. It's great to kind of hear from you and hear how across different sports, while things are different, they're very much the same as well. So thanks for joining today.